So in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Ashley Block and Johnny Iweiss from PlayHQ to talk to the feature. But just want to preface that this feature is a very powerful addition to the permit and transfers settings in the platform. The power sits at the association level, but the benefit will really exist more at the club level in terms of making that volunteering experience easier. A lot of power behind what you'll be able to do, and we're going to get into some of the detail here tonight. I'm very excited to share that with you. For those of you who don't know me, I am Priscilla Duncan, and I am the product owner of PlayHQ and Officials HQ. In addition to having the product ownership responsibility for cricket, I also lead the national delivery team, which is overseeing the training and onboarding of Australian cricket from My Cricket to PlayHQ. So this is the last of a number of milestones, summer 23-24, with Victorian WA and some competitions in Queensland coming online. And so in addition to having product responsibility, I've also been supporting the states and territories with their efforts. So with that, I'll hand across to Ashley Block.
Thanks, Priscilla, and thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate you giving up some of your Wednesday evening, as I know there's been quite a few sessions going on. So appreciate your time. We'll try and keep it as quick as we can. So as Priscilla said, we will focus mainly on our new transfers and permits settings and functionality that's going to sit at the association level. But this will mainly see the benefit at the club level, as Priscilla said. So the way we're going to do this is Johnny's going to go through a few slides and just talk about transfers and permits in general. He'll then also talk to the enhancements we've got. And then we have about, I think about 6 or 7 scenarios of where transfers or permits might apply and how you would actually go through them. So the process to approve a transfer or a permit is very similar in each of the scenarios. That doesn't change, but just how it works for you or the player, we'll go through each of those so you get a bit of an understanding of all of them. Appreciate that this is quite new to some people and it can be a little bit hard to get your head around. So please do put your questions in the chat if you need to, and we can answer what we can tonight. Of course, we can always follow up with you. So I'll pass over to Johnny. He's going to share his screen and go through a few slides, and then we'll get into some of those scenarios.
Cool. Yeah, go over to the next one. Yep, transfers. So a transfer is required when a player wants to move to a new club. So moving from Club A to Club B, that's when a transfer is required. Transfer involves the creating of a transfer request, which has a series of approval steps from their new and their old clubs and associations, any party that's involved. And those approval steps must be passed in order for a player's affiliated club or their home club to update. So a transfer request can be initiated by either the club admin in our admin portal, the admin of the new club, or by the participant during their registration. So when the participant goes to register for the second club, our system will know that they already have registered at a different club, and we will pop up saying a request to play, which will give the participant an option to either do a transfer or a season permit. So once the transfer request is created and goes through all the different approvals from both the old and new club and association, then the request is marked as approved. Once approved, the participant can then complete their registration for their new club, which means paying the fees and answering any custom questions that the club has put onto the rego form. And the original registration of their old club is cancelled if in the same season. So if you're moving clubs if you're playing the summer season and you want to move to a different club within your summer season, your old rego will cancel. However, if you're going from a winter season to a summer season, you're still able to play in both at one given point in time. So just as a recap, a transfer is kind of like a permanent move to a new club. We'll move over to the next slide, onto permits. A permit allows a player to play for an additional club or competition while still keeping their existing club of affiliation or their home club. So for example, you're playing on the weekend, but you also want to play for a different club in a midweek T20 competition. That's what a season permit allows. It's kind of like a loan to another club. Again, a club admin or a participant can initiate the season permit. A season permit can be requested for a set period of time, let's say a week or 2 weeks, depending on what the admin decides. But if the participant, up until a whole season, and if the participant initiates it, it will be for a whole season. Again, like the transfer, the request needs to be approved by all the clubs and associations involved, and it's a sequential approval flow, which I'll get to in the next step and in future slides. And then once approved, the participant will be then registered to play for their additional club or competition. And that's a season permit, which is set over a time period up until a whole season. You can also do a game permit, which is a request for a single game to allow a player to play for a different club or competition for a single game. In that situation, it can only be done by a club admin within our admin portal, and there is no approval steps required. It's just instant. We do all the checks and balances in the back end.
So as a club, a lot of your transfer and permit settings, or all of your transfer and permit settings will sit here under the transfers and permits. So this is where you'll go through to approve any outstanding transfers and permits that you might have. But your settings sit in here as well as a club. So as a club, you can automatically approve certain settings for transfers and permits. So for example, inbound transfers, if you just want to automatically approve any transfers coming into your competition and club without actually physically have to go in to do it, you can just turn that on, and that means your approval step would be taken, would just be completed automatically. And same with outbound transfers. So anyone who's leaving your club, if you don't care and you don't want to sign them off, you can turn that on and you wouldn't have to action any of that either way. Obviously, I would, there's probably reasons that you may not want to approve transfers. You want to make sure you're on top of people who may owe the club money or anything like that. So it's pretty rare to see that one on, but it does happen. And exactly the same option with permits as well. So if you want to automatically approve inbound permits that are coming into your organisation, you can turn that on and you won't need to do anything there. So they're just some settings that if you haven't checked recently, I'd suggest that you jump in there, just see what they're on and just make sure that they're meeting what you require. So this is an association setting here, and this is where the association can decide if the transfers and permits can be participant-led or club-led or both. So typically in the past, what you've seen is that a club would have had to have raised a transfer or permit request. So I, as a player, know that I need a transfer or permit. I would have to go approach the club that I am permitting or transferring to, so the club I'm moving to or the secondary club, and ask them to request a permit or transfer on my behalf. So that process can still take place as long as club admin led transfers or initiated transfers are on. In terms of if a participant transfer is on and participant permit, what that allows is when a player goes through the registration process, they get prompted to say, hey, you need a transfer or a permit, whatever's required. And then they can initiate that process, and the approval steps are exactly the same. So we're going to go into each of these scenarios a little bit more in terms of the participant initiated and the club initiated and what is required. But it's just a note that it is a setting that is set by the association. So if you're hoping to submit a club-led one and you can't, or you want your participants to do it and they can't, it's probably because the association hasn't activated these settings, and you can just touch base with them and they'll be able to tell you what that is looking like. Johnny, I might just quickly show those settings at the association level as well.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know we're going to talk about these a bit more. This one. So for an association, it does look very similar, and these new internal ones is what we're going to cover quite a bit tonight. So just as a note, associations do have the same options, the same settings, but they've just got a few more, and that's the new feature that we're going to talk through a fair bit tonight. So I know some people have got some scenarios coming through already, so hopefully we cover those off as we go through. The approval time. So Johnny, did you want to maybe?
Yeah, happy to. So each organisation in the approval flow gets up to 5 days to approve the request, approve or decline it. If they haven't had a look at it or haven't actioned it, it will automatically go on to the next organisation. So that is across the board for any transfer or season permit. So this is a separate to auto approving it in those settings. This, even if you don't have the auto approval on, after 5 days, it will approve on your behalf. Which leads on to the next slide, which is about notifications. So in the admin portal, in the notifications area, you can add many emails, people's emails, to get notified when a transfer or permit request is created and needs your organisation to approve or decline it. So yeah, that's in order for your organisation not to miss these come through, so you don't miss them. Otherwise, you can go into the transfers and permits area and look at the list to see all of them that require your action. See Ash has on screen where you go and add your email.
So once you add an email, you get the options there to turn on. You might have it for transfers and permits, or for both, and you can turn that on and off. It is a setting that's applied across your club or association, so you can't just say, I just want this on for juniors but not for seniors, and vice versa. But you can just turn on for transfers or permits if you want to. We've got the scenarios to get into now. What I might do is just quickly show the process to approve a transfer or permit, because it is exactly the same regardless of the scenario. So I'll just quickly demo that, and then Johnny and I can start talking through the scenarios, if that works for you, Johnny.
Yep, sounds good.
So I'm just going to go back to my club. This is the list of transfers. Here you can filter this list by just what you need to action. So if you do at the start of the season, for example, have quite a bit, you can just get that list to action now, and you can see any past ones as well. I'll go back to all status. This view is the same at club and association level. So you'll be able to have what you're needing to action, or any transfers or permits that your organisation is a part of, inbound or outbound, across your club and associations are exactly the same. The permits one looks exactly the same as well. You can see here what you've got, what you need to action there as well. So I'll start with the transfer, but if you click on a previous one, you'll be able to see exactly what's taken place here. But you can see that Connor Rosie requested the transfer on the 2nd of September. It was approved by Club 1, approved by Association 1. So these clubs are within the same association. If they weren't, it would need to go to the other association for approval as well. So if one of these clubs participated in PlayHQ Association 2, that association would also be part of the process. But you can always go back and see here who approved what and when. Given that all of these happened in quick succession on the 2nd of September, I imagine that there's quite a few auto approvals that would have been on here as well. So I'll go through and just action Tom Stewart now. And what you can see here is I've got my approve or decline options at the top, but I can also see the transfer timeline and where we're up to. So we can see that Tom Stewart requested on the 13th of September. And you can see that it's currently pending with Club 1, and it's got the 18th of September there, because if I don't action this within the 5 days, it will get auto approved, and you can see the rest of the chain required there for the approval. If you scroll down, what you will also be able to see for any transfers or permits is the player's incident history. So any suspension or incident history from PlayHQ will appear here as well, because obviously that's important to show during that process. If you need to decline a transfer, you can do so by clicking decline, and you will then be presented with the reason. And to approve, pretty simple, approve. And that will then approve that at my club, and you'll see that work through the next process in the association or the club chain, whatever's next. And then once that's approved, you'll be able to follow that timeline the whole way through. And then when it is approved, in this case, Tom Stewart would get an email notifying him to complete his registration. All right, we might just jump into some of these scenarios now. So Johnny and I can talk through some of the specifics of what's required and how those settings might impact. I'll just make this a bit.
Yeah, so the first scenario is a transfer scenario where, so I want to move from the South Sharks to the West Warriors in the same season. I will no longer play for the South Sharks in any format this season. So there's two options, as always, when you're doing a transfer, which is player initiated and club initiated. So if we look at that first row, the player has a current club of affiliation with the Sharks, and then they go to register for the West Warriors. Our system will identify that you need to submit a transfer because you already have a club of affiliation. And then we'll go through the approval flow, which is 3 different approvals: club, association, and then club. And once approved, the player completes their registration and pays fees. And then they are registered to play for the West Warriors. So that's the flow. As you see on the right, the auto approvals that you could enable to speed this up are as displayed. So the South Sharks, who was the original club, if they had their outbound outbound toggled on, that would automatically approve. For the association, they would need their same competition toggled on. And for the West Warriors Cricket Club, they'll need their inbound auto approval on. Now they don't have to, but if all 3 orgs did have them on, it would just be an instantaneous approval, and the player would get a email link straight away and be able to register for the new club straight away. I understand in certain situations you would want to manually approve it. The second option is club initiated. So that's where the admin for the West Warriors goes into our admin portal, creates a new transfer request. This time it's only a 2 approval step because they're the ones requesting it. They don't need to then approve it as well. So in that approval step, it would just be the South Sharks and the association involved. Once approved, the player will get an email saying to go and register, and then they can register, pay their fees, and be able to play for the West Warriors. So that's a transfer scenario. This season, I'm going to play for 2 different cricket clubs. I want to play weekend cricket for the South Sharks and midweek T20 cricket for the Northern Knights. So in this example, it's a season permit because the player wants to play for both at one time. So for a player initiated one, they go to register for the North Knights for them in the midweek T20 comp. We will identify that you already have a club of affiliation, so I'll ask you to do a transfer of season permit. You do a season permit, and in this one there is 3 approval steps. There's an outbound for the cricket club, there's a different club, different competition toggle for the association, and then the North Knights Cricket Club does an inbound approval. When they're all approved, the player can then register and play for both teams throughout the season. Club initiated option, again, it's initiated by the club in the admin portal, and there's only 2 approvals because they're the ones requesting it. They don't have to approve it themselves. So I think this is a very common scenario where someone does want to play midweek and on the weekend for 2 different clubs. Again, if you want to speed it up, you just have those auto approvals toggled on, as shown on the right. Cool. So the third scenario, this season I'm going to play for the South Sharks junior and senior teams. Both of the senior and junior teams play in competitions run by the North-South Cricket Associations. So in this example, there's 2 options. You could do a player registration where there would be no approvals, or you could do a season permit where there will be 1 approval. So if the player registers, let's say they first registered to their junior comp for the South Sharks, they pay fees to the junior comp, they could buy merchandise and answer any questions that are on the junior rego. And then if they want to play for the senior, they go register for the seniors. So they fill out the same the registration form for the seniors, pay fees again, answer any questions associated with that comp, and then they're registered. So the benefit of that is there's no work from the admin to do a season permit request. However, the player does have to pay twice, which you may want them to do. The other option is the club initiated. version, and that's where the club goes into our admin portal, requests the player to play in the seniors comp. There will be one approval from the association and then their right to play. So in this example, I would highly recommend that the association turns on the same club different competition auto approval toggle, the one that's shown on the right. And the reason I say that is because what I've heard from feedback is that associations don't really don't need to manually approve a request when the player isn't moving the clubs. It's really up to the club to manage that. So if you do have this toggle on, the player can just switch between the juniors and seniors instantly.
Johnny, just on this one as a quick shout out, one thing is if the club still wants the player to register for a second time and sort of take that workload but not pay, you can always give them a voucher to sort of zero out any fees that would be associated. Next one's there, Johnny.
Cool. So scenario 4. This season, I'm going to play for the South Sharks junior and senior teams. The senior teams plays in a competition run by the North-South Cricket Association, whereas the juniors in a competition run by the East-West Cricket Association. The same club, but different competition run by different associations. So again, in this scenario, there's two options. You can do a player registration for the seniors, or you could do a season permit to register the person for the seniors. So in the first example, a player rego, they register for the juniors, and then they go register for the seniors. And as Ash mentioned, you could set up a voucher if you don't want them to pay twice. In the second example, in the second option, the club initiated, that's again where the admin goes into the admin portal to create a season permit request to play for this new competition run by a different association. And in that example, there will be two approvals, one from the North-South Cricket Association and one from the East-West Cricket Association. So for the North-South Cricket Association, it's an outbound approval, and for the East-West Cricket Association, it's an inbound approval. So there's those toggles will manage those requests as should.
Next one is there, Johnny.
Cool. Next one. So I want to play winter cricket this year. However, my usual club, the West Warriors, is not entering a team in the winter competition. So I'm going to play for the North Knights. So this is a different club and a different competition. So it's going from the West Warriors to the North Knights. So this will need a season permit because you are changing clubs. And that's different to the last two scenarios where you weren't changing clubs. That's why you could just register without approval. Because you are changing clubs, you do need a season permit. And when I say changing clubs, I mean playing for an additional club. So I won't talk through every step again. It's pretty similar. If you register, it registers that you need a season permit. And in this example, there's 3 approvals for the player initiated. So you got the outbound for West Warriors, you got the different club, different competition approval from the association, and you got the inbound from the Northern Knights Cricket Club. So all parties involved need to approve it. For the club initiated one, you just don't need approval from the destination club, which is the Northern Knights. Again, I think this is another common scenario where people play winter and summer for different clubs. So yeah, hopefully this helps.
Yep. And I think this could be particularly in Victoria and WA a little bit different for this season, just because some players, their first registration to PlayHQ may have been to their winter cricket club. So for this sort of season, they needed to transfer back into their summer club. But as we move forward, that'll sort of activate the permits around that. Now, they could essentially also transfer between the two if they wanted to, so continue to transfer between winter and summer, but this is obviously a little bit easier and keeps their summer club as their club of affiliation.
Okay, now we're into single game scenarios. So in this scenario, I've registered to the South Sharks for the season. A friend has asked me to fill in for their club. the West Warriors, for this weekend only. So to do this, when entering the lineups for the game, the West Warriors can add the player via a game permit. Now, this can only be done via the admin portal and not eScore. And as I mentioned before, game permits do not require an approval process. So you just got to ensure that it follows the rules of your own competition. And associations do have the ability to turn off game permits and not allow them. But if it's on, this is how you do it. So as you see in the screen on the right, where you go add your player in the admin portal, there's a section called non-team players. You select the player there and it gives you 3 options. Club players, which are players that have registered to your club but aren't assigned to the team. There's a game permit section, which is this one, if you want to get a player from a different club. And then there's a fill-in option as well, which will be on the next slide. But in this example, if you have someone who has registered that plays for a different club, you go to the game permit, you find the organisation that they currently registered to, you search their name, and you simply add them to your team. And they will be able to play for that game only.
Perfect. Just a reminder on anyone who's a game permit, they must have a registration already active in this current season. Johnny will talk to the scenario next of them not having one, but just as a reminder, you can't just add just anyone who's ever been in PlayHQ as a game permitted player.
Yeah, so this is a fill-in scenario. I haven't registered for any cricket this season, but a friend has asked me to fill in for their club, the West Warriors, for this weekend only. So this player can be added by the admin portal, My Teams, or eScoring as a fill-in player. Note that fill-in players are only allowed to participate in one game as a fill-in, and their statistics are not recorded against their name. They are recorded. They will display as a fill-in player on PlayHQ.com. So when they do go register, you won't be able to see their stats that were recorded for them as a fill-in player. It really should just only be used by exception. So it's in the same area as the game permit. So when you're adding your lineup to a game in the admin portal, there's a section called non-team players, and you just got to toggle on to the right, which is called fill-in player. And what you need to do is add their first name, last name, email, and date of birth, and you simply add them to the game. But yeah, I haven't got the in My Teams and eScore. It's also a similar screen where you go click fill in. You select non-team players, click fill in, and you enter their name and details. I think in eScore, the player also has to accept some terms and conditions as well.
I think that is all of our scenarios to cover tonight. I'll just circle back very quickly on one thing here. Is just a reminder that fill-in players can only play one game, and that's really important. You can't just be added as a fill-in every week for the obvious insurance reasons and making sure players have got stats and things like that. We did have a question earlier around schools and representative cricket, and Priscilla, correct me if I get any of these details wrong, but the process for those sort of competitions, because they sit outside community club cricket, is the player can just register for them as a secondary registration, essentially, and a permit or a transfer isn't required for those competitions. So they're sort of exempt, for lack of a better word, from the transfer and permit process for representative and school competitions only. One thing I might just quickly show again is just those, now that we've gone through those scenarios, just from the association level, where those new settings will sit. Again, so it's in the transfers and permits. And in settings, you can see here that you've got the internal transfers, so same competition, different competition, and then quite a few new settings for permits, sorry. So internal, if the players play for the same club but a different competition, so that could be your junior, senior example within your association, but a different competition. Different club, same competition, different club, different competition. So if you refer back to those notes, you'll probably know which ones that you want to turn on there as well.